On my wedding night, to avoid bringing shame to the Miller family, they had Ethan Miller, Ryan's younger brother, stand in for him and complete the wedding ceremony. By the time everything was done, it was already past midnight. Ethan, reeking of alcohol, leisurely escorted me to the bridal suite. His tone was full of mischief. "Sis-in-law," he drawled, "if my brother can't get the job done, remember, you can always come to me." I gave him a cold glare and ignored him, turning straight toward the room. Inside, the lighting was dim. Only a floor lamp glowed faintly beside the bed. The man lying there looked tall, but curled up under the blanket, he seemed almost comically small. His dark, clear eyes stared at me without blinking. I studied him quietly for a few seconds. His skin was pale, his features soft, and paired with those clear, innocent eyes, he looked like a frightened little white rabbit. Honestly, with a face like that, I couldn't say I was losing out here. Maybe my gaze lingered too long because his fingers tightened around the blanket. His throat moved as he swallowed nervously. "Can you not eat me?" he stammered. I raised an eyebrow. "Who said I was going to eat you?" "My brother told me you were going to eat me up tonight." I walked closer to the bed, leaned down, and ruffled his hair. It was a little messy and surprisingly soft to the touch. "As long as you behave," I said softly, "I won't eat you." He tilted his head up to look at me. The warm yellow light from the lamp shimmered in his eyes, making them look even gentler. "I'll be good," he murmured. I patted his head. "Good boy. Now turn around. Your sister's gonna change." Obediently, he buried his head under the blanket. I kicked off my heels, slipped out of the tight wedding gown, and pulled out a silk nightgown from the closet that barely reached mid-thigh. In the mirror, the thin fabric traced the curve of my waist, and with my sharp, seductive features, the reflection looked a little too sultry. Still, this was one of the only pieces of clothing in the wardrobe that fit me. The wedding had come so suddenly that my father had handled all the small arrangements himself. He told me that as long as I gave birth to Ryan Miller's child, the vast Miller fortune, worth millions of dollars, would eventually be ours. My gaze drifted, and in the mirror, I caught Ryan's reflection. His jawline was tense, his expression cold and assessing. When I turned around, though, his eyes looked wide and innocent again, almost childlike. "I told you to turn around," I said. "It's too stuffy under the blanket. I couldn't breathe." I narrowed my eyes. Just a moment ago, I'd caught a flash of something sharp and predatory in his gaze, completely at odds with the timid little rabbit look he was showing me now. Ryan dropped his head, his hands nervously twisting the edge of the blanket. "I'm sorry, Amber." I didn't press further. The room was dim, and I'd had quite a bit to drink. Maybe I was seeing things. After washing up and doing my skincare routine, my head still felt heavy. I didn't bother with Ryan and simply lay down to sleep. No sooner had I closed my eyes than I heard soft rustling beside me. The mattress sank slightly as the blanket shifted. I opened my eyes and saw Ryan still dressed in his white shirt and black slacks. "You're sleeping in that?" I asked. He nodded, looking pitiful. Suit yourself," I muttered, closing my eyes again. I was just about to drift off when he whispered, "Amber?" His voice was cautious, barely audible. I sighed. "What is it now? This thing. It's really hard. It's poking me." What the hell was he saying at this hour? I turned over and saw Ryan lying on his side, a wounded expression on his face as he pointed toward the metal buckle of his belt. "I can't get it open," he muttered. I sighed and leaned closer, trying to help him undo the belt buckle. The room was pitch dark, and I'd never done this sort of thing for anyone before, so my clumsy fingers fumbled around for quite a while without success. Inevitably, my fingertips brushed against his bare skin. Unlike me, whose hands and feet were always cold, Ryan's body was warm, almost hot. "Amber," he whispered softly, his voice low and slightly hoarse. The sound carried a strange, intimate tension. "Huh?" I responded faintly, and before I realized it, Ryan had lowered his head closer to my neck. "You smell really good," he murmured. That faint breath against my skin made my face flush uncontrollably. I groped around for the lamp switch and finally turned on the bedside light. The bright light instantly scattered the vague suggestive air that had filled the room. Ryan blinked at me and asked innocently, "Amber, why's your face red?" "I drank too much," I said quickly, fumbling to switch off the lamp again. I crawled into bed, turned my back to him, and forced myself to sleep. I slept straight through until morning. When I woke up naturally, I got dressed slowly and went downstairs for breakfast. At the dining table, Ethan lounged lazily in his chair, swirling the spoon in his bowl of porridge with an amused expression. "Want some?" he asked in a mocking tone. Ryan stood nearby, watching longingly. The table was full of food, yet he didn't dare move. Ethan smirked. "Bark like a dog and I'll let you eat." Ryan hesitated, his face torn. "But Grandpa said—" Ethan's expression darkened instantly as he leaned forward. Ryan instinctively flinched back, fear flickering in his eyes like a startled puppy. Finally, he lowered his head and whispered, "Woof, woof." Ethan chuckled, patted his face, and said mockingly, "Good boy, here you go." The next second, the steaming bowl of porridge tipped over, pouring straight down Ryan's head. He trembled violently, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. His lips pressed tightly together, refusing to make a sound, refusing even to move. That was the last straw for me. I rushed down the stairs and shoved Ethan hard. "That's enough." The porcelain bowl shattered on the floor. Ryan's pale skin was flushed red from the scald. He wrapped his arms tightly around my waist, his body trembling, his voice breaking. "Amber, it burns." Behind us came Ethan's sneer. "Sis-in-law sure is kind-hearted," he said coldly. I didn't even bother to turn around. "Guess I'm too saintly for your taste," I said flatly. "Watch yourself," Ethan muttered before walking away. After he left, Ryan's eyes were red as he gripped the hem of my shirt tightly, enduring the pain while I applied ointment to the burn. "Does he always treat you like that?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "Why don't you tell Uncle Miller or your grandfather?" "Dad doesn't care. And Grandpa would be upset if he knew." "Uncle knows." I froze for a moment. Everyone knew that Ryan's father, Henry Miller, had married into the Miller family. He even took their last name. Climbing the social ladder through a woman's family had made him a joke in the business world, and my father had been one of the first to ridicule him publicly, more than once. But 3 years ago, after Ryan's mother passed away, old Mr. Miller grew weaker with age, and surprisingly, Henry managed to claw his way to power. He took control of the family company, then brought his mistress and illegitimate son into the Miller estate. Rumor had it that because of his humiliation as a live-in son-in-law, Henry resented Ryan and his mother deeply. Still, Ryan was his biological son. I never imagined his bias could run this deep. "Amber." Ryan tugged gently on my sleeve, his expression pleading. "Please don't tell Grandpa, okay? He'll be sad." My heart softened instantly. "All right," I whispered. At his age, telling him probably wouldn't change anything anyway. I stayed at the Miller estate for nearly a month. Ryan's burn gradually healed. One morning, after putting on a little makeup, I decided to take him shopping. The clothes I'd brought from home didn't fit, my nightgowns barely covered anything, and my everyday clothes looked far too old-fashioned. During the day, I like to keep a polished, graceful appearance. At night, I loosened up. Maybe that's what my father thought a clever woman should be. Calm, composed, and perfectly poised by day, indulgent and pliant by night. He had trained me like a commodity since I was little. My expression always had to be graceful and proper. My makeup, light and restrained. I wasn't allowed to have hobbies. I wasn't allowed to work. I wasn't allowed to interact with men. All I had to do was play the obedient doll, waiting to be married off in exchange for business benefits, helping him secure alliances and resources. Unfortunately for him, I inherited his stubborn streak. I don't like losing, and I refused to be anyone's puppet. I agreed to this marriage only because the Miller family was powerful, a perfect stepping stone. And since the man I was marrying was simple-minded and harmless, it seemed like an ideal arrangement. What I didn't expect was for that simpleton to be this adorable. At this moment, Ryan stood stubbornly beside a street stall, holding up a pair of fluffy white rabbit ear headbands. "Amber, buy this, it's cute," he said with such earnest delight that I couldn't refuse. I sighed and bought it, wearing the cheap bunny ear headband as I took his hand and led him toward the men's clothing store. His wardrobe was filled almost entirely with formal suits, and the few sets of pajamas mixed in were so old they looked ready to fall apart. I figured that after his illness, no one had bothered buying him new clothes. While Ryan was in the fitting room trying on a sweatshirt, my phone buzzed. It was my father. I frowned and picked up. "Dad, how's that little fool doing?" he asked, his tone casual. He's fine, I said. Pretty obedient. Good. From now on, just stay home and keep him happy. The sooner you have a child, the better. Take him to see old Mr. Miller more often. Don't be fooled by how successful Henry looks now. Most of the real power is still in the old man's hands. I know, I replied. And don't get involved in any of the Miller family's other messes. Keep your mouth shut. I hesitated. What about what Henry said? Forget it, my father cut me off. Just then, a pair of warm hands slipped around my waist. A soft, fluffy head brushed against my neck as Ryan's voice murmured playfully, Amber, hang up. Flustered, I hurried to end the call. Ryan had changed into a loose, soft sweatshirt. His slightly messy hair fell over his forehead, and his damp eyes were full of innocent gentleness. He looked completely different now. His suits had always made him appear too restrained, too formal, like a boy forced into a man's world. But in this, he looked his age, young, bright, and effortlessly handsome. Maybe it was because I'd spent too many years watching people manipulate and scheme under my father's shadow, but looking into Ryan's clear, guileless eyes made me pause. Do I look good? He asked, tugging lightly at my sleeve. I blinked, snapped back to myself, and smiled. You look great. Let's get that one. After we finished shopping, Ryan carried several shopping bags in both hands as we stood in front of a crowded milk tea shop. He swallowed hard, glancing toward the counter. You want one? I asked. He looked embarrassed, but nodded. Of course, he'd picked the busiest place in town. Stay here. Don't wander off, I said, before stepping into the crowd in my heels to stand in line. I didn't usually like sweet drinks, and I hated crowds even more. Standing there surrounded by people made me restless. I should have just ordered it online. Hey, gorgeous, mind if I get to know you? A male voice came from behind me. No, I said curtly, not even turning around. Come on, just add me on WeChat. I'll buy your drink. I sighed impatiently. Do I look like I need someone to buy me tea? He went silent for a second. Then suddenly, a hard shove hit my waist, making me stumble forward a few steps. Pain shot up my ankle as I turned to see a heavy-set man, taller than me, pushing through the crowd with fury on his face. Think you're too good for me, huh? He snarled. Before I could even respond, a pair of strong hands grabbed the man's collar from behind and yanked him backward. He stumbled out of the crowd, startled, and just as he turned to curse, Ryan's fist crashed straight into his face. The punch landed squarely on his nose, the crack loud enough to make me freeze in shock. Ryan's face was tense, his expression sharp and unyielding, nothing like the timid boy I'd met before. Ryan's fist came down again and again, not giving the man even a chance to speak. The guy had acted tough before, but he was just a paper tiger. After a few moments of struggling, he realized he couldn't win and immediately gave up fighting back. The arrogance vanished from his face, replaced by pitiful whining and fake sobs. That's enough, Ryan, I said firmly. He froze, chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. My ankle's twisted, I muttered, limping over. How much? I asked the man directly. His nose was bleeding, his face a mess, and he groaned out a number, just a few $1,000s. I wasn't in the mood to argue. I transferred the money right there. As soon as I finished, a sudden warmth wrapped around my ankle. Ryan was kneeling on one knee, his large palm gently cupping my swollen foot. His voice was low and full of concern. Amber, does it hurt? I'm fine. Get up, I said softly. You're getting your new clothes dirty. I helped him to his feet, brushing the dust off his sweatshirt, but when I lifted my head, I met his dark, unreadable eyes. He caught my wrist and with a light pull drew me into his arms, his head buried into the crook of my neck, his voice quiet and uncertain. Amber, will you always be this nice to me? I will, I said, though guilt pricked at me, because in all my carefully plotted plans for the future, he had never been part of them, his voice muffled against my skin. Liar. Something in my chest trembled. Then it hit me. Who taught you how to fight? Grandpa, he said matter-of-factly. He said if someone bullies me, I should hit back. Then why don't you fight back when your brother bullies you? Because he's my brother, Ryan murmured, lowering his gaze. That simple, innocent answer made my heart ache. By the time we got back to the Miller estate, it was already late. A black Maybach was parked at the front gate. The moment I saw it, my whole body tensed. The man Ryan had fought earlier had been shorter, so he hadn't landed a clean hit, but his nails had left several thin, bloody scratches along Ryan's chin and neck. Now he was carrying all our luxury shopping bags, his arms full, his neck and jaw streaked with red marks. From an outsider's perspective, I must have looked like the worst kind of woman, beating and tormenting a slow husband, spending his money on expensive things, refusing even to walk, and making him carry everything like a servant. The car door opened, and a slender figure stepped out. Pale skin, petite frame, silky black hair draped over her shoulders, and a pair of teary eyes that shimmered as she looked at Ryan, soft, sorrowful, like she could cry at any moment. That had to be Renee Shaw, Ryan's white moonlight. Back then, every rich girl in town had envied her for being engaged to him. They were supposed to get married, until the car accident that left Ryan with the mind of a 6-year-old. Renee's family had fought fiercely against the marriage, and though she had resisted for a while, in the end, she'd caved under pressure and broken off the engagement. The Millers, desperate to save face, had scrambled to find a replacement, and that's how I became the bride. If that accident hadn't happened, Renee would have been Mrs. Ryan Miller. Not me. "How could you be so heartless, Amber?" Renee said softly, casting me a sharp glance before her eyes filled with worry as she turned to Ryan. "Ryan, are you okay?" "Hi," I said awkwardly, patting Ryan's shoulder. "You can put me down now. I can walk." I was just a stand-in, a placeholder. I had no interest in inserting myself into their tangled feelings, but Ryan tightened his grip around me and started walking toward the house. "Amber's hurt. I'll carry her." "I don't want to play with you anymore," I said in exasperation. "Is Amber hurt?" Renee gasped. "Just twisted my ankle a bit," I said lightly, then forced a polite smile. "Why don't you come in and sit for a while?" Renee didn't hesitate. She followed us inside. In the living room, I sat on the couch with a cup of hot tea in my hands, quietly watching the show unfold. Ryan sat across from me, and Renee, without a hint of hesitation, slipped right into the seat beside him. Her expression was full of concern. "Ryan, how did you get hurt?" she asked softly. "Beat up a bad guy," he said seriously. "Bad guy?" Renee glanced at me, her tone curious. "Oh, right," I said casually. "I had a little argument with someone. Got out of hand." Renee didn't seem to care that I was sitting right there. She reached out with her delicate pale hand and brushed her fingers toward Ryan's chin. "Does it hurt?" Ryan instinctively pulled back, dodging her touch. Instead, he crouched down in front of me, checking my ankle. "Not me," he said quietly. "Amber's the one who's hurt." I forced an awkward smile. "It's nothing serious." Renee tilted her head, her lips curling faintly. "Ryan really seems to like you, Amber." I smiled lightly. "He's a good boy." I reached out and gently patted his head. "Have you taken Ryan for a follow-up check recently?" she asked suddenly. "Yesterday," I said. "The doctor said there's still some congestion in his brain," I added. "The chances of recovery are slim." Renee nodded thoughtfully. "Has Mr. Miller or your father-in-law come by to visit him lately?" "No," I said flatly. "You're the first one to visit him." Renee nodded again, then picked up her purse and stood. "Well, Amber, you have to take good care of Ryan. I won't keep you." Ryan helped me up and followed her to the door. We watched together as she got into her car and slowly drove away. Standing there in the doorway, I couldn't shake the feeling that Renee's visit hadn't been out of simple concern. She seemed to be testing something, perhaps whether Ryan's condition had truly left him impaired. When I turned to look at him, Ryan's face was calm, his expression distant. There was a flicker of coldness in his eyes, so different from the silly, innocent look he'd worn before. "Ryan," I called softly. He turned toward me, and the chill in his gaze disappeared as his lashes lowered. Without a word, he bent down and scooped me up in his arms. "Amber, I'll take you to rest." I wrapped my arms loosely around his neck, lost in thought. Even though we'd only been living together for a month, I realized he'd never actually used childish words like boo-boo or owie, the way people claimed he did. What he said earlier tonight, the way he'd acted, almost seemed deliberate. And lately, I'd begun catching glimpses of seriousness on his face from time to time. A clarity in his eyes that vanished the instant he noticed me looking. Could Ryan be pretending to be slow? It was a dangerous thought, hard to prove and even harder to confront. And honestly, I didn't have time to dwell on it. What mattered most to me right now was work. My father had always been strict, refusing to let me take a job, but behind his back, I'd been quietly saving money and investing in a startup. It had finally begun to take off. Now that I finally had some freedom, I was determined to build something of my own. That was part of why I'd agreed to marry Ryan in the first place, a husband who was sweet, compliant, and easy to handle, someone who wouldn't get in my way. But on my very first day at work, I realized I'd been completely wrong. Ryan called me every hour, sounding pitiful, asking if I didn't want him anymore. Even my business partner, Chloe Parker, couldn't stand it. "Amber," she said dryly, "why don't you just bring him with you?" I turned off my phone irritably. No way. Eventually, I just blocked his number. The world finally went quiet. Chloe had been my college friend, a smart, sharp-minded woman from a modest family. After graduation, I'd given her the seed money to start a company, and she hadn't disappointed me. Everything had been running smoothly and professionally. Since it was my first official day at the office, I was especially motivated. Chloe and I discussed the company's future until nearly 10 that night. When I finally got home, the sky was dark. The faint porch light cast long shadows across the front of the house. Ryan was sitting alone on the bench outside the villa, dressed in a thin white dress shirt and suit pants, waiting for me. I parked the car, stepped out carefully in my heels, and walked over. "Why are you sitting out here?" He kept his head down, silent. I sighed and reached out to ruffle his hair. "Are you mad at me?" He gave a quiet hum of acknowledgement. "Mad about what?" I sat down beside him. "You went to work," he said softly, lifting his head to look at me. His eyes were serious. "Amber, you don't have to work. I have money. I can give it to you." The night breeze was cool against my skin. I couldn't help but flinch a little, then smiled at him. "You don't have enough money." Ryan leaned closer, wrapping his arms tightly around me, pulling me against his chest. His body was warm, melting the chill in the night air. "I have lots and lots of money," he murmured. "Why isn't it enough?" "Because I want to buy freedom," I said softly, letting myself lean into his embrace as I gazed at the faint shimmer of stars in the distant sky. Since I was young, I'd been taught that my only value in life was to get married. Every step of my life had been carefully planned for me. But I didn't want that kind of life. I wanted to prove that I could stand on my own, that one day I could even surpass my father. Ryan didn't respond. Instead, I felt something warm brush against my cheek. I froze for a moment, then turned my head, meeting his eyes, clear and bright like starlight. "Got it," he said softly. "Don't worry, Amber, do what you need to do." "Then you can't interrupt me at work anymore," I said seriously. Ryan thought about it for a few seconds, then nodded. "I'll try." He took my hand and stood up. "Let's go back inside. It's too cold out here." "All right." I followed him. My eyes drifted to the ground, where I spotted several cigarette butts scattered near the steps. Only 3 people lived in the house, me, Ryan, and the cook. During dinner, I asked the housekeeper casually whether anyone had visited that afternoon. She said no. She didn't smoke either, which meant the cigarettes had to belong to Ryan. The suspicion that he was pretending grew stronger, though I had no proof. And even if I asked him directly, I doubted he'd admit it. I decided I'd find the right chance to test him, but before I could, work completely consumed me. A foreign corporation was preparing to enter the domestic market, with an enormous investment at stake. It was a perfect opportunity for us, but plenty of competitors were eyeing the deal, so I had to monitor every development, day and night, determined to win it. As my overtime hours stretched later and later, Ryan grew increasingly unhappy. Every evening, right at the end of my shift, he'd call me, "Amber, it's time to come home." I'd pinch the bridge of my nose and reply helplessly, "I have to work late tonight. Don't wait up, just go to sleep." At moments like that, I sometimes got the strange illusion that we were a real married couple. Or maybe, lovers. Beside me, Chloe couldn't hold back a laugh. "Let me guess, he's calling to tell you to come home again?" I nodded. "I don't want to sleep," Ryan said on the phone, his voice full of grievance. "If you're not home, I'll come find you." "What for?" I said, exasperated. "I'm working. I'll be scared if I stay home alone. It's dark." I hesitated. The housekeeper had already gone home for the night. If Ryan really was as simple-minded as everyone believed, leaving him alone in that big house might actually be dangerous. "Fine. Put on something warm, I'll ask my assistant to pick you up. Ryan hung up. Chloe was already grabbing her car keys. I'll go get him. I raised an eyebrow. So eager? She grinned. Back when we were just starting out, I saw your husband at a business gala. He was surrounded by people. I didn't even get the chance to say a word. Now I finally get to meet the real-life version of a cold, domineering CEO. Of course I'm excited. I couldn't help but laugh. Domineering CEO? He's just a big kid now. Still, I'll go, she said. Send me the location. An hour later, Chloe returned, with Ryan following right behind her. He was dressed in a casual tracksuit and a black hoodie, the hood pulled low over his head. His long legs carried him toward me in steady strides. Without a word, he wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, resting his chin in the crook of my neck, gently nuzzling against me. Amber? Chloe froze, clearly uncomfortable, and quickly looked away. You two talk, she said awkwardly. I'll be in my office. The sudden intimacy made my cheeks burn. I instinctively pushed him away. Behave, I whispered. We're in the office. You need to be careful. There's no one here, Ryan said softly, leaning in again. His words caught me off guard. Ryan loved being close to me. At first I thought it was harmless, just childlike dependence. There was nothing wrong with that. But ever since that night when he kissed my cheek, and after I started finding cigarette butts on the ground, I couldn't tell anymore whether his closeness was innocent affection or something more adult. And that phrase, there's no one here, that unconscious, natural tone, didn't it prove he saw this as something between a man and a woman, not a child and his guardian? Could someone with the mind of a 5-year-old really think like that? Amber, are you mad? He asked gently, then kissed my cheek again. I'll go sit over there, okay? Fine, I said, forcing a smile. Chloe and I have work to discuss. You can play some games over there. I guided him to a nearby chair and went out to the meeting room. As soon as I stepped out, Chloe leaned close, lowering her voice. Is he actually not all there? What do you mean? I asked. When I picked him up, he just nodded at me. Didn't say a word the whole ride. Honestly, he seemed completely normal. Exactly like when I saw him at that gala years ago. I couldn't help glancing back through the glass wall at Ryan. The white office lighting cast a glow on his tall figure. The edge of his hoodie shadowed his sharp, handsome profile. His slender fingers tapped absently at his phone screen. He looked perfectly normal. Not like someone mentally impaired, just quiet. He's not much of a talker, I said lightly, steering Chloe back toward the meeting. Soon after, our new investment project entered the bidding phase. Our competitor was none other than the Miller Group. Obviously, I couldn't appear personally, so Chloe handled the presentation. The competition was fierce, and honestly, I didn't expect us to win. But somehow, we did. Representing the Miller Group that day had been Ethan Miller, and according to Chloe, he'd been furious afterward. That meant our company's road ahead wouldn't be smooth. I thought it through. This project was a huge win for us. There was no way I'd hand it over. Ethan wasn't exactly the smartest, and if Ryan really was faking his condition, then Ethan probably had enough of his own messes to deal with. Not much of a threat. Still, I decided to test Ryan, to find out the truth. After thinking about it, I came up with a safe, foolproof way to do it. Chloe had planned a company outing to celebrate the successful bid. I attended, staying the whole night. Ryan called over and over, but I didn't answer any of his calls. As the party wound down, I deliberately poured a bit of wine over myself, letting the smell soak in. It was past midnight when everyone left, and only then did I finally answer his call. Amber, Ryan's voice sounded small, full of grievance. I'm scared of the dark. I can't sleep. Where are you? I looked around at the quiet street under the dim streetlight. There was a long pause on his end. Then his voice dropped, suddenly steady and cold. You've been drinking. I slurred on purpose. No, I can still drink more. Stay where you are, don't move, he ordered. I'm coming to get you. I hung up, quietly impressed by how fast his demeanor had flipped. Definitely faking. With that kind of acting, it was almost a waste he wasn't in film. Not even 20 minutes later, a black Maserati came roaring down the street, stopping sharply right in front of me. Ryan stepped out from the driver's seat, his long strides eating up the distance between us. Do you feel sick? He asked, his tone calm but firm. I nodded, playing along. A little. He scooped me up in his arms without hesitation and carried me to the passenger seat, fastening my seatbelt carefully. Leaning in, one arm braced against the car door, he looked at me with a faint, restrained smile. "Didn't drink enough," he murmured. "Next time, drink more, then you won't feel sick." I frowned at him, confused by his tone, his words, and the cool sharpness in his eyes. Most of the time he acted as meek as a little white rabbit. But now, he was full of sarcasm and attitude. Ryan, clearly annoyed, reached out and pinched my chin. "Who are you pouting at?" "I'm not," I said quickly. For some reason, that only made my face burn hotter. Sure, you're not." He gave a soft snort, then slid back into the driver's seat and started the car with practiced ease. I sat beside him, lost in thought, wondering if I should expose him. Ryan pretending to be slow probably had nothing to do with me. If I could confirm he was faking, then I didn't have to worry about Ethan. Ryan would never let him get away with anything. There didn't seem to be much point in confronting him. But if Ryan wasn't actually impaired, then once he decided to drop the act, would he just divorce me and go back to his white moonlight, Renee Shaw? If that was the case, then why did he still keep kissing me, holding me, treating me like this? Jerk. I was so caught up in my thoughts that I didn't even realize we'd reached the house until Ryan got out, opened the door, and scooped me into his arms. Startled, I instinctively wrapped my arms around his neck. Ryan looked down at me, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "Hold on tighter, you'll fall." Still angry, I loosened my grip immediately. He stopped walking, glanced down at me, and murmured, "Should I hold you or not?" I glared at him. "Fine, whatever. Do what you want." He carried me all the way upstairs to the bedroom, bracing his hands on the bedframe as he leaned over me, his gaze dark and unreadable. "So, should I hold you or not?" he asked again, his voice low. "Why would you? You already put me down," I said stubbornly. "I can hold you here," he murmured. "What's wrong with hugging your own husband? Do I always have to be the one to initiate it?" It was true. Ever since our marriage, he'd always been the one to reach for me first. But now that he thought I was drunk, he dropped the gentle act and decided to bring it up like this, using the opportunity to settle scores. "I'm not hugging you," I muttered, turning away. "Let Renee do that." The words slipped out before I could stop them, and I immediately regretted it. I must have really been tipsy to say something so stupid. Ryan let out a quiet laugh. "She only came by that one time, and you're already jealous?" "I'm not jealous," I said quickly, though my pulse betrayed me. I took a breath and decided to stop skirting around it. "Ryan, you've recovered, haven't you? You've been pretending this whole time." He didn't even flinch. "Yeah." The bluntness of his answer stunned me. "You're not worried I'll ruin your plan?" I asked. He said nothing, his eyes fixed on mine. After a long silence, I sighed. "Then once you've handled whatever it is you're planning, and once my company's a little more stable, we can file for divorce by agreement." Ryan's expression darkened. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. "We've only been married for 6 months, and you're already planning a divorce? Don't you want one?" I asked quietly. "No." His gaze dropped to my lips, his Adam's apple bobbing slightly. "We've been married for half a year already. A kiss shouldn't be a problem, right?" Before I could answer, his lips were on mine. The kiss was slow and deep, warmth and the faint taste of wine blurring my thoughts. It wasn't forceful, it was steady, patient, and dangerously tender. When he finally pulled back, his breath was hot against my ear. "I never planned to divorce you, and you're not allowed to plan it either." After that night, Ryan stopped pretending around me altogether. The atmosphere between us grew more complicated by the day. Since I'd never really been in love before, I blushed at the smallest things. Ryan quickly picked up on it, and once he did, he only got bolder. Every night, he insisted on holding me while we slept. Even if I pushed him away, I always woke up in his arms the next morning. If I told him to step out while I changed, he'd sneak up behind me, wrap his arms around my waist and whisper, "Amber, before, when you changed, you just told me to turn around. Why do I have to leave now?" Before bed, he'd always say, "Good night, Amber." Now, it had become, "Good night, my wife." I had to admit, though I didn't know exactly when it happened, I'd started falling for him. But Renee Shaw, she was still the thorn lodged between us. Even if Ryan and I had no connection before our marriage, she remained the one shadow I couldn't seem to ignore. Rumors about Ryan and Renee's CEO falls in love with me story had spread everywhere. Even I had heard about it. Renee Shaw had been an illegitimate daughter, someone her family never acknowledged publicly. She met Ryan back in high school, purely by chance. Moved by her innocence and kindness, Ryan developed feelings for her, and the two soon fell in love. When Ryan went abroad for college, his father, Henry Miller, brought Ethan back into the family and formally gave him the title of the Millers' second son. It was said that Ethan once pursued Renee too. Whether it was genuine affection or just a way to compete with Ryan, no one knew for sure. But Renee didn't waver. She took a year off from school, flew overseas, confessed to Ryan, and stayed by his side for a full year. When both families finally agreed to their engagement, Renee returned home, satisfied and proud. Her engagement ring was outrageously luxurious. After she posted it on social media, it even trended for days. Everyone marveled that domineering CEOs like Ryan really did exist. Renee had once loved Ryan so passionately, so publicly. Their relationship stretched from high school all the way through his graduation from college. Compared to that, what Ryan and I had was quiet. No courtship, no drama, no passion. Just a calm, measured existence. And no matter how I tried to suppress the thought, I couldn't help but wonder. When everyone eventually found out Ryan had recovered, when Renee's parents stopped opposing them, would Ryan really be able to resist her tears? It took me 6 months to get my answer. During those months, Ryan kept up his act in public, still pretending to be slow. No one bothered us, no one paid attention. Meanwhile, my company's growth had skyrocketed. Then one day, Ethan made the news. He'd been in a car accident. The headline said he was drunk at the wheel, killing 1 person and injuring 2. Soon after, an official statement came out. Ethan hadn't been the driver, he'd just been in the passenger seat. His friend, the actual driver, had been arrested. After that, Ethan kept quiet for half a year. When he appeared in the news again, it was because he and Renee Shaw had gotten engaged. The wedding was scheduled for a month later. When I walked into the study one evening, Ryan was staring at a photo of the two of them on his computer screen. I reached out and ruffled his hair. "What's wrong? Does it hurt to look at?" Ryan pulled me gently into his lap. "Don't say nonsense." I scrolled through the pictures casually. "Do you think Ethan will invite us to the wedding?" "Of course," Ryan said dryly. "He can't wait to use it to make me uncomfortable." "Oh," I pretended to be indifferent. "What kind of gift should we bring?" "You don't need to worry," he said calmly. "I've already prepared something." "All right then. I'll go to bed first. You can keep staring if you want." Ryan kissed my forehead lightly. "Okay, good night, Amber." I walked out quietly. My chest ached, a dull, expanding pain spreading through me. I didn't want to be anyone's substitute or their second choice. Even if my love wasn't loud or dramatic, I still believed I deserved to be loved wholly, without comparison. But could Ryan really give me that? For the next month, I kept my distance from him. He seemed busy too, spending most nights holed up in the study until late. He didn't even notice my growing detachment. Then, just before the wedding, Ethan called. "Sis, did you get the invitation?" "I did," I replied flatly. "Good, make sure you bring my brother. Grandpa wants to see him." I almost laughed. Ryan hadn't even attended his own wedding, but now he could show up to Ethan's? No wonder he'd pretended to be mentally slow. Henry Miller's favoritism really was astonishing. "Wake up, sweetheart." A low, husky voice brushed against my ear. Soft kisses landed on my face. I turned my head away, half asleep. "First time I've seen you up this early," I murmured groggily. "My dear brother's getting married today," Ryan said lightly. How could I not get up early to send him a wedding gift? I'd almost forgotten it was Ethan and Renee's wedding day. "I know," I mumbled, forcing down the bitter twist in my chest. "I'll get ready now." I pushed myself up slightly, and Ryan caught my arm, pulling me gently until I fell right against his chest. "What's wrong? Not happy?" he asked softly. "You just noticed a month later?" I muttered. "Isn't that a little late?" "I've been busy getting your gift ready," he said, looking guilty. "After today, I'll make it up to you, okay?" "Sure," I said absently. It was too early to argue. He must have realized I was brushing him off because he tightened his arms around me, refusing to let go, kissing and coaxing me, alternating between Amber and my wife, until my irritation started to melt away. "I'm going to change," I finally said, pushing at his shoulder. Your dress is in the closet, he reminded me. I opened the closet door and froze. Hanging there was an exclusive gown from a luxury brand I'd never been able to afford. My family had always been well off, but this kind of couture was on another level entirely. I obediently slipped into the gown, applied light, polished makeup, and tidied myself up carefully. When everything was ready, I descended the stairs slowly. At the bottom of the staircase stood Ryan, leaning casually against the entryway with his arms crossed. He was wearing a perfectly tailored black suit, gold-rimmed glasses resting on his nose, his skin pale from staying indoors too long. It was the first time I had ever seen him fully dressed up. I'd met plenty of handsome men, even celebrities, but for the first time, I understood what it meant for someone to look like they'd stepped straight out of an anime panel into the real world. But the thought struck me. Was he dressed so impeccably because he wanted to give Ethan a grand gift, or because of Renee Shaw? Across the room, Ryan was staring at me too, frozen, his eyes soft and stunned. When our gazes met, my chest tightened, a confusing mix of warmth and ache rising together. I adjusted the hem of my dress, stepped down the last few stairs, and stumbled right into his arms. He bent his head and kissed my forehead. You look beautiful today, he whispered. My cheeks flushed instantly. In the tall mirror nearby, our reflections overlapped. His sleek black suit and my ivory gown blending like they were made for each other. When we arrived at the wedding venue, most guests were already seated. Ryan walked beside me, calm and composed, his hand wrapped firmly around mine. I could feel countless eyes turning toward us, whispers rippling through the crowd. Some people looked ready to come greet us, but Ryan ignored them all. His focus fixed ahead as he guided me straight to his grandfather's table. Mr. Miller Sr. didn't look well. His back was bent, and he leaned heavily on an expensive cane as he sat silently among the guests. If it weren't for that cane, worth more than most people's cars, no one would have guessed that this frail old man was the founder of the Miller Group. Grandpa, this is Amber, Ryan said, bringing me forward and sitting down beside him, not even sparing Henry a glance. The old man didn't look surprised to see Ryan fully recovered. He simply studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. This girl is just as you said, pleasant to look at. Thank you, Grandpa, I said politely, smiling. I couldn't help glancing toward Henry Miller, who was sitting nearby, his face dark with disbelief. So what is it? Henry sneered. Are you cured, or did you just develop amnesia again? Can't even greet your own father now? Before Ryan could respond, the wedding music began to play. Renee entered, radiant in a pure white wedding gown, her smile delicate and poised. As she passed by our table, her steps faltered slightly. Her gaze flicked to Ryan, and in her eyes was that same restrained longing, like she still had words she wanted to say but couldn't. I didn't dare look at him. I was afraid that if I caught them staring at each other, I might actually lose control and flip the table. Under the table, a large, warm hand suddenly wrapped around mine and squeezed gently. Ryan leaned toward my ear, his breath brushing my skin. Amber, he murmured, I've been thinking about it for a long time. Let's have our own wedding, properly this time. That simple sentence melted something inside me. The wall I'd built around my heart finally began to crumble. I squeezed his hand back. Okay, I whispered. Up on stage, Ethan Miller was already standing at the altar, but Renee's gaze kept darting toward Ryan. When Ethan noticed it, I could practically feel his composure cracking. Just as the couple was about to exchange rings, several police officers burst through the door. The police strode straight toward Ethan, snapped handcuffs onto his wrists, and didn't give him a chance to react. The entire wedding hall descended into chaos. Guests shouted in confusion, reporters' cameras flashed non-stop, and the crowd erupted with frantic voices, gasps, arguments, curses, blending into a wall of noise. Through it all, Ryan and his grandfather sat perfectly still, calm as stone. Ryan even sipped his tea occasionally, watching the chaos unfold with quiet detachment, as if it were a show put on for his amusement. I leaned closer to him, whispering under the commotion, "This is the gift you said you were giving Ethan?" "Yeah," Ryan murmured, his lips curving faintly. "And this is just the beginning. The real surprise comes later." Grandpa Miller had clearly overheard us. He chuckled softly, nodding. "That's enough, Ryan. Come see me tomorrow." He stood up slowly, resting on his cane. I've had my fill of entertainment for today. After Ryan escorted his grandfather out, he turned to me with a teasing look. Tired of the show yet? Let's go home. I thought you said there was something bigger coming, I said, arching an eyebrow. Ryan laughed quietly, his arms sliding over my shoulders as he guided me toward the exit. You really do love a bit of drama, don't you? The rest of it, well, that part's not here, it's at home. Ryan, the voice came from behind us, soft, trembling, full of hurt. We turned around. Renee Shaw was standing there, her eyes rimmed red, her white wedding dress trailing behind her as she walked toward us. Ryan, she whispered, her voice breaking, you've recovered. Why didn't you tell me? If I'd known, even if my family had forced me to death, I never would have married Ethan. Ryan's face remained impassive. And why would I tell you? Whoever you marry, it has nothing to do with me. I'm married now. Renee turned her tear-streaked face toward me, her expression twisting with disbelief. But you married her when you weren't in your right mind. How can that count as a real marriage? Ryan's tone was calm, almost bored. The marriage certificate from the registry says otherwise. Tears finally spilled from Renee's eyes. You're angry because I married Ethan, aren't you? You know how my family is. They never gave me a choice. Years ago, I took a year off from college and flew to the US all alone for you. You know that. From beginning to end, I've always chosen you. Ryan let out a quiet laugh, his voice laced with irony. Renee, do you really think I'm stupid? When Ethan started pursuing you, you never once turned him down. Do you know how many private photos he sent me of you two together? Her face went pale. Did you really believe he'd keep your little secret for you? He continued coldly. And that trip to the States you keep talking about? That wasn't your idea. It was your parents'. They wanted you to chase after me because they were certain I'd inherit the Miller fortune. Your devotion was never to me, it was to what I represented. Renee froze, her whole body trembling, tears streaming down her face. Ryan tilted his head toward me, slipping an arm around my shoulders. Want some popcorn to go with the drama? He asked softly. I tried not to laugh. So, she cheated on you after you went abroad? He gave me a helpless look. What do you think? Then why did you still stay in the States with her for a year? I asked, half teasing. I was there to study, he said dryly. She wanted to tag along. What was I supposed to do? And you still got engaged to her after that? Ryan smirked faintly. That was just to disgust Ethan a little. Worked, didn't it? I shook my head. And to think I once thought you were all innocence and sunshine. He leaned in slightly, his voice lowering. When it comes to you, Amber, I've always been that way. I didn't know how to respond to that. The next morning, Ryan and I were sitting together at his desk, scrolling through the news on his laptop. Miller Group declares bankruptcy. Ethan Miller arrested. Someone had given the police evidence, proving that in the earlier drunk driving accident, Ethan had been the actual driver, and Henry Miller had paid off someone else to take the fall. Overnight, the Miller Group collapsed completely. It turned out that Henry had never gotten over being a live-in son-in-law. He'd always resented Ryan's mother, Ryan himself, and even the old man who had founded the family fortune. Ryan's mother's death from illness. There had been more to it than anyone realized, and Henry hadn't been innocent. After Ryan returned to the country, Ethan had set up the car accident that supposedly left him impaired. But Ryan had seen through it immediately and played along, pretending to be slow while secretly dismantling the Miller Group from the inside, turning it into an empty shell. Everything had been part of his plan. Everything. Except me. When Ryan reappeared in public, it was as the CEO of a foreign investment firm. At a business meeting, he entered the conference room in a crisp, tailored suit, and that was when I finally realized the company I'd been collaborating with all along had been Ryan's doing from the very start. On the way home, I let out a long sigh. And here I was, thinking our first big business deal came from pure hard work. Turns out it was my looks that sealed it. Ryan chuckled beside me, his lips curving. Then should I pull my investment? Since apparently, I'm guilty of being seduced? Beauty is part of my skill set, I said dryly. He shot me a sly look, leaning in as the car stopped at a red light. His hand slid behind my neck, and he kissed me, murmuring against my lips, I'm part of your skill set too. The car behind us honked impatiently, forcing him to finally pull back. Meanwhile, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. It was my father. I hesitated, then declined the call. "Why didn't you answer?" Ryan asked. "I don't need to," I said. "I already know what he's going to say. Keep my head down, be a proper wife, and hurry up and give you a child." Ryan turned his head slightly, his tone casual. "Having a baby doesn't sound like a bad idea." "No way," I blurted out before he even finished. "I want to focus on running my company right now. I'm not thinking about kids anytime soon. You won't mind, will you?" "Of course not." He parked the car and looked at me seriously. "Whatever you want to do, I'll support you completely. And if your dad gives you trouble, just blame it on me. Tell him I'm infertile or something." I gave him a slow once-over. "You're not serious, are you?" Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he scooped me up in his arms as we entered the house. "I guess we'll just have to test that theory, won't we? Good thing I've been wanting to test it for a while now." After the Miller Group went bankrupt, Ethan went to prison. Henry Miller was left penniless, drowning in lawsuits. He came looking for Ryan several times, but every time he was turned away. Eventually, he even showed up at my company. The man who had once strutted through life in designer suits now stood before me wearing a torn, filthy jacket, his face unshaven, eyes hollow. The first thing out of his mouth was, "I want to see Ryan." "He doesn't want to see you," I said firmly. "Amber, don't forget, if it weren't for me, you never would have married Ryan," Henry snapped. "You owe your comfortable life to me. You should be thanking me." I smiled faintly. "You're right, I really should thank you." Ryan's voice came from behind him, calm and cold. "It's probably the only good thing you've ever done." Henry spun around, his voice rising. "You ungrateful bastard! That's your own father!" Security rushed forward as he tried to lunge toward Ryan, restraining him. "I don't have a brother," Ryan said quietly. "And I don't have a father either." He stepped in front of me, tossing a thick envelope at Henry's feet. "The fact that you're not in prison yet is the last bit of mercy I'll ever give you. Did you really think those dirty little deals of yours were well hidden?" Henry picked up the envelope and flipped through it. His face drained of color. "If you ever try anything again," Ryan said flatly, "these files will be all over the internet by morning. I keep my promises." Henry stumbled out of the building, defeated, and this time, he disappeared from our lives for good. When everything finally settled, Ryan and I held another wedding, this time one that was truly ours. As he held my hand, we listened to the officiant read our vows, then exchanged rings. The ring Ryan had chosen for me was elegant, exquisite, and impossibly beautiful. Still, I couldn't help teasing, "It looks smaller than the one you gave Renee." Ryan blinked. "What ring? I never bought her one." "Don't play dumb," I said, rolling my eyes. "Your engagement ring for her, it was all over the internet back then. You can still find the photos." "Really?" He pulled out his phone, searching for a moment before shrugging. "That one? I bought it, yeah. But it wasn't for her. My buddy was getting married and asked me to help pick out a ring. I chose the most expensive one and he gave it to Renee. I didn't even know she'd posted it online. Besides," he added, lifting my hand, "the one you're wearing now costs way more. They just look the same size because I had yours recarved after it was finished." He smiled lightly. "But if you don't like it, I'll buy you another one." "No need," I said softly. "I love this one." "Then shouldn't you show it?" he murmured, leaning in to kiss me. Before his lips met mine, a sharp cough sounded behind us, my father's. I jumped, startled. Ryan didn't even flinch. "Excuse me, Amber." My father's voice broke the moment, calm but cold. "I'd like a word." I hesitated, not wanting to follow him, but eventually sighed and walked over. Lately, my company's name had started gaining real recognition in the industry. I figured my father must have heard about it. Sure enough, before I even reached him, his tone turned sharp. "Who gave you permission to do this?" Ryan spoke before I could. His voice was steady, polite, and unmistakably firm. "Amber is an adult. She doesn't need anyone's permission to make decisions. And if it's about the company, I respect every choice she makes. As her father, I imagine you'd want to be happy too." My father froze, momentarily speechless. The lecture he'd clearly prepared never made it past his throat. He muttered something under his breath and left, stiff-backed and silent. After that, Ryan wouldn't stop pestering me with the same question. "When did you start liking me?" The question always made me smile, even as countless memories flickered through my mind. Ryan, with those dark, clear eyes staring at me for the first time. Ryan, trembling slightly as he wrapped his arms around my waist. Ryan, resting his head in the crook of my neck. Ryan, kissing me quietly under a sky full of stars. I thought about it for a while before answering. Probably from the very first time we met, I said softly. And every second since then. I just kept falling deeper.